Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday. I'm Jeanelle Slade. Russ has the night off. A blockbuster blizzard about to play out across the Midwest, potentially leaving the edge of its wrath right here in our region. Another round of this, one of the most intense storms on record that hit the Midwest just 3 weeks ago, now predicted to dump even heavier snow this time around. Bob McGuire joining us now. Bob, snow and flood warnings. It feels like we're right back at it again, and it all starts again tonight.
And right here in Montana. Let me show you what's happening out there. This is our high-resolution forecast model. It all starts and revolves around that low-pressure cell over between Bozeman and Billings. It's pushing moisture up into the Billings area, and at the same time, it's pulling cold air down from Canada into the rainfall. So what's going to happen eventually as the night goes on, this cold air is going to cause all that rain to change over to snow by tomorrow morning, and then that low pressure cell will continue to track into the central part of the country, and now the blizzard is on. It's going to pull most of the moisture away from the Billings area on Wednesday, but it's going to be an interesting system. Take a look at this. It tracks all the way up towards Minnesota. And so how much snow are we talking about? Well, here in the Billings area, computer models are saying 4 to 6 inches of snow, 14 to 20 inches over at Sheridan, Rapid City about 10 to 14 inches, and over by Minneapolis as much as maybe 6 to 10 inches of snow. But we're still talking 50-mile-per-hour winds, so that means it's a blizzard, and it's going to be piling up snow all over the place. Our forecast, that's coming up in a few more minutes.
All right, thanks so much, Bob. Well, another kind of natural hazard struck twice today in southwestern Montana. A 4.4 magnitude earthquake followed by a 3.5 magnitude quake shook residents about 100 miles south of Butte. MTN's John Amy reports.
A magnitude 4.4 earthquake interrupted the lunch hour about 6 miles northeast of Lima Tuesday.
It was big enough that it was felt over parts of southwest Montana. There were a few reports from Butte, from people feeling it. I have to say it. We got a little shudder in this office.
Though the quake was felt a long distance, it was still a relatively minor event.
I've heard reports that there were some items knocked from walls in the town of Lima, which was pretty close to the epicenter. A couple other folks that I spoke to down in the Lima area described it as a boom or an explosion, so very loud and sudden, quite a startling event.
This quake occurred along a fairly active fault called the Centennial Tectonic Belt, but hasn't experienced a major quake in decades.
The really significant earthquake that occurred in this zone was the 1983 Bora Peak, Idaho earthquake, which had a magnitude of 6.9, resulted in 2 fatalities in Chalice and caused significant damage.
Now this roll records the McKenzie Canyon seismograph station, which was only about 20 miles from the epicenter. And you can see the earthquake is recorded right here, and then the subsequent aftershocks. Now, this wasn't a large earthquake, but it was felt by some people all the way up here in Butte, Montana.
My desk shook a little bit, and the cabinet right over there shook. And I went next door to my office mate, and I asked her if she had felt that, and she said yes.
In Butte, John Amy, MTN News.
Thanks, John. Well, today emergency responders across the Billings area played out a scene of devastation in hopes to prepare for the worst. Both local hospitals and more than a dozen other emergency teams used an active shooter scenario. Q2's Jenny Fick got a unique perspective of today's drill, volunteering as one of the many victims left behind.
We're here to practice a mass casualty situation that would cause a significant influx of patients into our hospital, that some may be critically injured, and to test our capacity to handle that situation.
Volunteers were given cards describing various injuries. My character had suffered a gunshot wound to the abdomen and the thigh.
So you're not really able.
In some situations, such as the Vegas shooting tragedy, victims were arriving in numbers and not always in an emergency vehicle.
They show up in a private vehicle, they walk in, and so trying to recognize that, and then how do we activate our disaster system to get going.
Staff must be able to manage a large number of trauma victims incoming.
We really realize that we need to expand it outside the ER, into the hospital, move patients around, see what we can do, and really stress our systems.
This would be in addition to providing care to the already high level of patients in the hospital due to cold and flu season.
It goes all the way from the OR to the ICU to distribution, because we got to have extra equipment and beds. So it's absolutely a hospital-wide process.
This drill allows them to see what they need to change, what is working, as well as limit the emotional response in such a chaotic situation.
I just have a lot of confidence in the physicians and nurses and staff members that they will be able to think through the process. Obviously, none of us would ever want this to happen, but we just want to be ready for our community and obviously provide compassionate care, but a very high level of care, even a very chaotic situation like today's.
As the first trauma victim to arrive until I made it up to the OR, it was less than 15 minutes, which proves just how truly important these drills are in preparation for a real emergency. In Billings, Jenny Fick, MTN News.
Thanks so much, Jenny. The Billings Police Department tonight warning the public to not fall for the latest scam. Police say residents are receiving calls for donations from a group claiming to have purchased canines for the department. Police say do not give any personal or financial information out over the phone, and to feel free to contact authorities if you have any doubts concerning solicitors claiming to support the police department. These calls, unfortunately, are almost impossible to trace.
So a lot of these scams are using like voice over internet protocol phones, so you can't trace them. They're oftentimes out of state, maybe even out of country, so they're almost virtually impossible to trace.
And Willie tells us ConocoPhillips, Shields, and a private citizen in the community have all provided money to help fund the police canine unit. Montana and Wyoming Senators Steve Daines and John Barrasso are now resurrecting a bill to move forward a Washington state port that would handle coal from both states. Daines and Barrasso say their bill would prevent the Clean Water Act from being, quote, used as a weapon to block coal exports. Now, the bill aims to limit the Clean Water Act. Washington state officials cited the Clean Water Act when it denied a permit for the Millennium Bulk Terminal's coal dock in Longview, Washington 2 years ago. Developers of the Millennium Terminals hope to export 44 million tons of Powder River coal to markets in Asia through the Columbia River port. Daines and Barrasso introduced similar legislation last summer, but that effort stalled after a committee hearing. Now, Missoula now making a move to become the first Montana city to step away from fossil fuels. Last night, the city council continued its commitment to going green. Even with some mixed emotions during the public comment period, city council unanimously voted to adopt a resolution to move the city's electricity to 100% clean renewable sources by 2030. This is a formal community-wide commitment to renewable electricity in the next 10 years. Those against the move say they are being forced down a path with only one option. However, city council members argue it actually allows for more choices. Missoula gets most of its electricity from Northwestern Energy, which is also paving a long-term plan for how it produces energy.
The majority of our power comes from Northwest Energy, and right now Northwest Energy is trying to get a bill through the legislature that will allow them to buy another 150 megawatts of coal power. That is moving in the exact opposite direction of what this resolution is trying to address.
Missoula has now become one of 117 cities across the country to establish the 100% clean renewable energy plan. Well, flu activity is now on the decline across Montana. After a peak in mid-February, the number of flu cases reported has fallen each week. Now, still, last week, more than 540 new cases were reported. The Department of Health and Human Services also reports in Montana 19 people have died from the flu this season. Only one Montana county has remained unaffected. That's our neighbors to the east in Treasure County. They have not reported even one case this season. A new app is allowing Montanans to easily connect with their local health experts, even without leaving their home. The app, called Bright App, is aimed at helping people easily connect with a licensed clinical professional. Users can search and locate behavioral specialists, postpartum counselors, and gambling addiction specialists. Now, the Bright App provides a list of local health experts within your area.
I know how difficult it is to find mental health services. And I just feel like we need an easy way to not just go to a primary care provider and ask for a referral, which is a great option, but to be able to take it in your hands and say, you know, my child is struggling with peer relationships or school issues, and be able to get a list of providers and make those phone calls myself too if I'm not really seeing the results that I need to.
Now you can get the app by searching the web for brightapp.org. Well, still ahead on your Q2 10 o'clock news, U.S. Attorney General William Barr faces questions from Congress about the Mueller report. We have his answers. Plus, is Montana on its way to legalizing sports betting? Find out the status of the bill making its way through the state legislature. And in sports, Montana native Trace Tinkle declares for the NBA draft. Scott has the details.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger, Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire, and sports with Scott Breen. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.